turn it over now to David, who's one of our Baha'i.chat producers, to give a little bit of an introduction on the Baha'i faith and an introduction to what we are doing here today.
Thanks so much, Anissa, and Justin. Great to have you. We have quite a group of folks coming in here. It's wonderful. You know, I was an avowed atheist during all of my teen years, a card-carrying atheist, and I would tell you that if I met you. And I was introduced to the faith as a young film student at USC. I was, I think, 22 years old. And there's a wonderful quote in the writings. Baha'u'llah wisely says, "Not everything that a man knoweth is it timely to disclose." And I met someone who untimely disclosed something they probably might have wished they hadn't, but in the final analysis, it was good. It was a quote from the writings of Baha'u'llah. I was invited to a fireside, much like we're having here, but one live and in person. And I read this, and I got angry. I thought, my goodness, how, you know, from my limited perspective, then how arrogant. And little did I know. I'd like you to bring that quote up, and I'd like to share it. So here's the quote from the writings of Baha'u'llah. "How great is the cause? The purpose underlying all creation is the revelation of this most sublime, this most holy day, the day known as the day of God in his books and scriptures, the day which all the prophets and the chosen ones and the holy ones have wished to witness." And I thought to myself, my goodness, that's, you know, quite an extraordinary claim. And I began going to firesides really to disprove that statement. And little by little, it began to sort of seep in, and it began for me to make sense out of all religion and all history. But, you know, even now I think that particular quote, and there are many others like that in the writings, you know, anyone who would claim to have a revelation awaited by Jesus Christ and Moses and Muhammad and Buddha and the Krishna and all of the prophets of God, either they would have to be who they claim to be or stark raving mad. I mean, and, you know, and I think for me, there's really no middle ground. I hope that doesn't sound irreverent to say, but the wonderful thing about this faith is that one of the teachings and principles is independent investigation of truth. No one should accept this claim made by anyone without their own investigation. Baha'u'llah spent 40 years of his life in prison and exile. 20,000 of the early believers were put to death in the most inhumane manner. And Baha'u'llah, for the first time in religious history, wrote in his own pen, a prophet of God writing in his own pen, and literally tens of thousands of tablets and prayers, comprising over 100 volumes of writings that have, in less than 2 centuries now, been translated into 800 languages. For me, as I investigated, there really is nothing that right-thinking folks in the world today talk about or contemplate: rights for women, the abolition of prejudice of all kinds, and so forth, that Baha'u'llah didn't author long before we began to even really have these conversations and this discussion. And why would someone spend their life in prison and exile? He was born to, he could have had wealth, 4 successive exiles, the final one to Akka in Israel, and all for this reason. And I'm going to bring this quote up and end with this, and invite everyone really to your own investigation of this stupendous, stupendous claim: that all nations should become one in faith, all men as brothers, that the bonds of affection and unity between the sons of men should be strengthened, that diversity of religion should cease, and differences of race be annulled. What harm is there in this? Yet so shall it be. These fruitless strifes, these ruinous wars shall pass away, and the most great peace shall come. Thank you. Back to you, Anissa.
Thank you, David, for offering that introduction. So now we're gonna get started with our program. And I just wanted to remind people that we are also streaming on Facebook, and the link for that was shared in the chat. And just in terms of a little formatting thing, so we are taking questions throughout the call on the Q&A function on the Zoom, and you can also write questions in the comments on Facebook. And then we're going to end the program after Justin and I have a little talk with each other with some Q&A from our attendees. So you probably already know him, but Justin Baldoni is an actor, director, producer, speaker, and entrepreneur who is focused on being of service through his work in creating impactful media and entertainment. He is the creator of the award-winning documentary series, My Last Days, co-founder of Wayfarer Entertainment, and is the chairman of the Wayfarer Foundation. We are so delighted to have Justin with us here today to talk about this journey of finding faith and what that means, and even continuing on to discuss the progression of the soul and some of these really sort of deep, mysterious spiritual concepts. So Justin, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us.
Hey, what's up, Adisa?
Hey.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
What's up, everybody? Hi. How's everybody doing? You can't really answer, so I'm just talking to myself.
Yeah.
And then I saw somebody ask. They said if their cameras are going to be showing. No, they're not. So don't worry about putting on makeup or anything like that. You can type in your questions or whatever. But thank you guys for doing this. This is cool. I just texted a bunch of my friends. I have this cool app where I can text people. So hopefully they've signed in or they're watching on Facebook, and they can watch later. And what a great way to start a Saturday. I just got out of a cold shower. That's why
nice.
It
that's
was
good.
Awesome.
It's morning for you. It's like still morning for you guys on the West Coast, so that's all good.
It's 11. It's like 11:23 now.
But I feel like a pandemic Saturday morning, that's like as good as 9:30.
Yeah, but I feel good. I did get myself up and work out. My wife and I did a little boxing cardio thing together over Zoom with some friends. It was pretty fun.
Nice.
So yeah.
Good to hear you're having a good weekend morning. My morning was really good, like typical Brooklyn. It's kind of cold today. I went for a walk and just passed some really nice community gardens, and it's been nice
to
have
a mask?
Pockets of nature.
Were you wearing a mask?
I was wearing a mask. Yes.
Good.
Always very cautious, careful, 6 feet away, all that good stuff. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I guess we can jump into it.
Sure.
I think we're going to start off by just talking about sort of generally faith and what this means, and trying to understand sort of our relationship with this. So maybe you could just start off with answering this question of, what does faith mean to you?
What does faith mean to me?
All
right, Anissa, way to dive into all right, what does faith mean to me? So let me just start by saying I'm not a Baha'i scholar. So anybody who's watching this, whether it's on the Zoom or on Facebook, just know that there really are no experts in the Baha'i faith. The beauty of the Baha'i faith is that all of us have the ability to interpret God's writing. So I just want to say, what I am sharing today is my interpretation of my faith. It's not gospel. There's no preachers or pastors. Everybody has the ability, as David said, to investigate truth for his or herself. But when you ask me, what is faith to me? Of course, this is a Baha'i chat, but I go back to a quote from the Baha'i writings, which says, the essence of faith is an abundance of deeds and a fewness of words. And to me, that's what faith is. Faith is about doing. It's not about saying. And then later, Abdu'l-Baha goes on to say that by faith, it is meant conscious knowledge and then the practice of good deeds, right? So he says, first, it is meant conscious knowledge, meaning we have to know something. And then We have to do something good. And if you put those two definitions of faith from the Baha'i writings back to back, it goes to show you that faith is about understanding something, knowing something, asking questions, as David said, the independent investigation of truth, figuring out, what does God mean to me? Like, what is, like, understanding, like, okay, well, what did Jesus say? What did Muhammad say? What did Buddha say? Understanding what these masterful prophets and teachers have told us, having that enter our brains, then not talking about it, but then doing something with it, preferably good deeds. You don't have faith if you only have one of those things. And that's what I love about the Baha'i writings. And this particular question you just asked me is faith. You can't have faith if you just know something.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have faith if you just do something.
Yeah.
It's the marriage of the two things, right? It's the sperm and the egg creating a soul. It's these things. That's the intersection of faith. And for me, I've had periods of my life where it's been one or the other. I've had a lot of periods of my life growing up where I just knew something, right? I just knew maybe what Jesus or Baha'u'llah said about something, but it didn't mean I did something. And what I'm trying to do in my 30s is I'm trying to marry the two. Trying to figure out how I can take the things I'm reading, to take the things I am learning about, take my understanding of God and turn it into action. That's my answer. Yeah. I'm going to close my door, by the way, because my kids are
sure. Running. Yeah. No, I think that's a really powerful reminder, this coupling of belief and action, because often when we think about spirituality or religion or faith or belief or whatever words we may choose to use, it is it's something that, in some interpretations only exists within our own mind. And so to really prioritize this action component, I think transforms our relationship with this concept, because then it becomes not just about ourselves, but about our relationship with others, which is very powerful.
I think you also have to go back to the purpose, right? So what's the purpose of faith, right? What's the purpose of religion, right? And why does God send these teachers and these prophets? And I think we should go back and I want to just give everybody a short window into what I believe.
Please.
And that is, I believe that God, from the beginning of time, we talk about God's covenant with mankind, which was God would never leave our species, human beings, without guidance. So from the beginning of time, pre-recorded history, pre-religion, right, organized religion, God has always given humanity a teacher of some sort to guide us, to hopefully evolve into the spiritual beings that we are destined to become. And over time, that has looked like a lot of different things. Specifically, if you trace it back through the Abrahamic faiths, you have all of the world religions, from Adam and Abraham to Zoroaster, to Moses and Muhammad and Jesus, and now to Baha'u'llah. So the idea is, if humanity is a school, and we're in kindergarten and first grade and second grade or third grade, the Baha'i belief is that God is sending us teachers that can teach us like 1 + 1, right, when we're in first grade. And then in second grade, he teaches us 1 - 1 and 2 - 1. And then in third grade, he might teach us multiplication. I mean, I don't know what we actually learn in third grade, but we might learn 2 × 2, right? And then division. And every grade grows and expands on the previous one. It doesn't mean that what you learned in first grade is wrong. You actually need 1 + 1 to understand 1 - 1. And that is the belief from a 10,000-foot view of the spiritual teachings of all of the world religions, is that you actually need all of the previous religions to learn about the new one. And our belief is that from the beginning of time to the end of time, we will always be left with a teacher, with a prophet. And the Baha'i faith's view is that we are now in college, right? We've graduated high school. We've learned all these things. We're now in college. And hi guys, Daddy's on a call right now. I love you. I love you. I know. You want to meet my kids? Hold on.
Sure.
Guys, Daddy's talking to a lot of people. Wow, what happened?
I put so much stuff in there.
Oh, you're okay. Give me a kiss.
Can you fix it?
I will fix it in a little bit, okay? I love you. You got this. I believe in you. This is how it works. This is how quarantine works,
right.
Especially on a Saturday. So, and I don't even know where I was. The essential belief is that we're in college. We're in the age of maturity, and the purpose of the faith, the purpose of religion, is to bring all of us together, to stop otherizing each other, and to realize we are all brothers and sisters in one family. All right. We are all the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch, as Baha'u'llah says. We are all one. And the only way we can realize we are one is if we take a step back and realize that all of the teachings, all of the faiths have all been teaching us the same exact thing from the very beginning. It's the basic math. Love one another. The virtues, selflessness, service, honesty, kindness, sacrifice. All of these things are all parts of all of the world religions. And here we are now with a very urgent message for humanity saying, guys, we got to stop seeing each other as different. It's time for us to realize that we are here together on this planet to coexist and to love one another despite our beliefs.
Yeah.
So that's important in the framing, I think, for me, of faith. Because if you just have this idea of like, well, what is faith? I think you also need to have a purpose, right? And I don't believe we're here on this planet just to like individually reach like this perfect state and like, you know, become these Zen masters that can like meditate and flow through life perfectly. I think we're here to grow. And the only way we can grow is if we're challenged. It's like the gym, right? Like when I go into the gym and I work out, I don't go to work out to do nothing. I go to work out to like hurt myself, to like feel a little bit of pain so that my muscles can tear. And so that then blood can go into those muscle fibers and then they can grow. That's why we're here on earth. I just saw somebody that said, does the Baha'i faith recognize Jesus? And yes, absolutely. The Baha'i faith recognizes Jesus. And that's one of the reasons why I love the faith. I like, you know, we recognize all the major prophets and teachers. And we cannot accept Baha'u'llah unless we accept that Jesus, as an example, was the Son of God. All right. So I diverge. Here you go.
No,
Next
but
question.
I think these are all important points in sort of contextualizing, first of all, what faith is, what religion is, but also the teachings of how the Baha'i faith relates to this idea of faith, where, you know, we believe that there is one God. There is this changeless faith of God, where there might be differences of social teachings or interpretations or semantics or whatever it is, but that ultimately every single human being has this shared sort of spiritual essence and connection and rooting that is really what makes us human.
And the word for that in the Baha'i faith is progressive revelation. So if anybody's curious, like what the word is for this idea that there's one religion, there's one teaching that unfolds throughout time based on our capacity as humans to evolve and to understand, it's called the progressive revelation. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I'm curious to hear just from your own experience, you know, we've talked a little bit about religion as sort of this more formal thing, but how your sort of more personal, like spiritual life has been shaped or impacts your everyday life.
Well, I think that they go hand in hand. I think that I don't think I can have sorry, my kids. I'll be out soon, guys. I love you all. I love you guys so much. This is impossible. The next time we're going to do this at nighttime while my kids are not here. Ask me the question one more time.
Sure. No, I was just wondering about sort of your spiritual understandings, and as opposed to like religion as something more formal, like thinking about spirituality as something that might be more personal or a little bit more like ambiguous or kind of less structured in a way.
Yeah, well, I believe that everybody's on their own individual journey. And I think that, you know, Abdul Baha says the only difference between human beings is that we're at different stages of our spiritual development. That's one of the things I love about being a Baha'i is there's zero judgment. There's like, it is none of my business what somebody else does with their life, with their religion, with their faith. I've always grown up believing more in spirituality than religion, right? And what's interesting is, there's even a quote, Baha'u'llah says that if religion be the cause of discord, disunity, or strife, then God would prefer it not exist. And the key of my relationship with faith is that it all goes back to that mystic feeling that lies underneath it, right? The container. And that's the thing that motivates and touches me so deeply, is that individual relationship, that one-on-one relationship with someone and their creator. And so oftentimes in religion, you can get so bogged down with what somebody else is doing, or what somebody else is, oh, that person's not following the rules or the laws, or that person's not a good Christian or a Baha'i or Jew, and that person's not going to service. And what I love about our faith is that none of that exists. There's this idea of like, we have to plow our own fields, right? And if we look over to see how someone else is plowing their field, then we start to lose track of our own. So it really is about that individual relationship. And that's been huge for me. It's because I'm somebody that, sometimes can compare myself to others. Oh, that person is so much more spiritual than me, or that person is so much more prayerful, and wow, that person knows so much more. And then I can start to feel like I'm not enough. And what I love about our faith is that it's so much about like where you are in your journey. So when I go back to the writings, when I go back to my faith, it impacts every aspect of my life, because I have to remember, as God said, that I was created noble, right? He created me rich. Why do I bring myself down to a basement? Why do I bring myself down when God put everything in me, in you, in every single person, regardless of what religion they are, what gender they are, their sexuality? It is all between one person and God. And at the end of our lives, nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows the spiritual development of ourselves, right? Nobody knows our capacity except our creator. So anybody that says otherwise is wrong. And one of the things I love, Abdu'l-Baha says that if two people argue about the teachings of the faith, they're both wrong. There's no place for it, right? It's all for us to look at the teachings, look at the writings, and then interpret those into our own hearts, and then walk with them, right? Allow those to be our deeds. Yeah. So yeah, I don't even know if I answered your question, but for me, I just go back to it's all been about spirituality for me. The religion is the container, right? Yeah. I believe that religion is necessary, because if we were left to our own devices, we're a bunch of stupid children playing in a sandbox that are fighting over toys and over real estate of the sand. We don't have the ability to govern ourselves. We need a container, a spiritual container that allows us to measure what's right from wrong from a spiritual perspective, right? Allows us to have a sense of what justice means, because we can start to interpret things the way we want to, and then bend the rules so that we can feel like we are right, so that we feel better about our lives. So I believe that, I think about religion in the way that I think about stop signs and traffic lights. Do we need them? Some places don't. Are they good for us? Yeah. Are they annoying when we're late? Sure. But if somebody wasn't organizing when that side goes and when that side stops, we'd have a lot of collisions. And I think that there's a mercy in faith. There's a mercy in religion where God says, look, my children, you sweet, innocent children, please don't put your hand on the stove. I don't want you to burn yourself. And it comes from this love of us. And that's why I believe religion exists. Spirituality is the individual connection we have with our creator.
Yeah. And I think that's such a powerful reminder of kind of the dual nature of a lot of these topics, where it is so deeply personal and internal and intimate, but then also beautifully vast and mysterious. Yeah. And it's kind of grappling with this coupling that makes these topics so powerful and interesting. I want to now kind of shift gears a little bit to talk about the progression of the soul and life after death, and heavy topics, but especially relevant right now and always relevant. So can you explain a little bit what the Baha'i understanding of life after death and the progression of the soul is?
Yeah, again, it's like, whew. But I when we talked about like, what should we talk about? That was one of the things I thought we could kind of touch on, because I think that there's so much fear right now. These are, you've heard it a lot, these are unprecedented times. Like, nobody who's alive right now has ever really experienced this, unless you're a few of these 104-year-olds that are getting, that are walking out of these coronavirus hospitals after having lived through the 1918 flu pandemic. We haven't lived through something like this. Like, I'm looking at my my office, I have my little thing here, and you see there's people, you see that couple walking, there's an old couple, they're walking around wearing masks. Like, we're living in a movie, right? We've seen these movies. It's crazy. And the reason we wear masks, right, is so that we can protect someone else. But also, we're wearing masks because we're afraid. We're afraid of being infected with this virus. And more than that, what's underneath that? We're afraid of what happens next. We're afraid that we could die. And why are we afraid that we can die? For a lot of reasons. One of is we don't know what happens when we die, right? We don't want to leave this world. We don't want to leave our friends and family. We don't want to leave our children, our parents. We don't want to go through that uncomfortable process of what might happen. And we don't know where the hell we're going. Let's be real. We know what each of the teachers, each of the prophets have told us, right? That there's this magical thing that exists outside. There's heaven, right? But there's also a lot of fear that comes with that, because there's a lot of judgment in what we've learned throughout religion. This idea that if you are not this, then you're not going to go there. And I get it to a certain extent, but that's not the Baha'i belief of what happens when we die. And so whenever I can, I try to share a little bit of that, because more than anything, I just want people to know that, yes, it's good to be cautious, but we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be afraid. We have to find a way to do things out of love, right? This idea that love and fear, that love never dwelleth in a heart possessed by fear, right? I'm going to say that quote one more time. Love never dwelleth in a heart possessed by fear. Fear and love have a hard time coexisting together. So when we're asked to stay home because of the pandemic, when we're asked to do these things, if we stay home because of love, then it changes everything that happens during the day. If we stay home because we love our parents, we love our elderly neighbors, we don't want to be carriers of this virus, that changes it. But if we stay home because of fear, then we're so much more likely to experience anxiety and depression. I know I've experienced anxiety during this pandemic, and it's not fun, because you're staying home and you're worried about people, you're worried about, work and all of these things. There's 27 million people in our country unemployed right now. There's other reasons to be fearful, but to be fearful of death and dying is to not fully understand what God tells us about it. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to snap your fingers after you learn, as an example, what Baha'u'llah says about the afterlife, and suddenly not have any fear, but it will at least relieve some of the anxiety of the unknown. So here's what the Baha'i belief is, and here's the thing that's been so helpful to me over the course of my life, and the reason why I spent the last 7 years making these documentaries about individuals who have terminal illnesses. It's the reason why I made 5 Feet Apart, and Clouds, which is about to come out. I want people to feel comforted knowing that there's something that exists beyond what we see. So Baha'u'llah says that to understand death, we have to look at birth, okay? And he goes on, there's infinite topics that we could talk about today, but he goes on to say that for every physical law in the universe, there's a spiritual counterpart. Meaning, so again, to understand death, right, you look at birth. There's a spiritual counterpart to gravity. There's a spiritual counterpart to any of the physical laws in the universe. So why do we look at birth? Well, let's go down to what happens in the womb. You have a sperm and an egg that come together, souls formed, babies in the womb, and the baby is existing in what's called the matrix, right? Not the movie, but the matrix of the womb. And it has everything that it needs. It's getting its food, its sustenance, it's the perfect temperature. It's floating in this like magical little bubble where it's protected from the outside world, which doesn't know exists. It's developing things that it doesn't need in the womb. It's developing eyes so that one day it can see. But the baby in the womb has no use for its eyes in the womb. It's developing a nose and a sense of smell so that one day it can smell. But it doesn't need the sense of smell in the womb. It's developing lungs and a mouth and a tongue so it can taste, arms, legs so it can walk. But it has no use for any of these things in the womb because it's just sitting there growing them. It has no free will. It's doing it on its own accord. All the while, the baby is coexisting in a world infinite in scope to the world that it's in now, mere inches away. So just inches away on the other side of that womb lies the planet Earth, which it is also living in, right? There's a mother who's carrying it. There is a sky. There's a sun. We're on Earth, and it's orbiting the sun. There are clouds in the sky. There are trees. There are flowers so that you can smell. There's food so you can eat. There's ground so you can walk and run. There's sounds so you can hear. The baby has no freaking clue it's developing any of these things, nor does it know that it's right next to this magical, infinite world. But one day, the baby is going to die of the womb. It's going to die in an uncomfortable process and be born into this world that was right there the entire time. It's going to go through a tunnel, a dark tunnel where on the other end is light, and it's going to be greeted, ideally, by people that were waiting for it the whole time, that were watching it and helping it develop, that were praying for it and talking to it, by a mother who was eating hopefully the right foods, preparing herself for the birthing process, by a parent who's just going to be taking it in. And suddenly, as soon as it enters this new world, it has a use for all of those things that it was developing that it didn't know. It takes its first breath and it burns and it starts to cry, and suddenly there's a voice and it can smell and its eyes open and it can see, oh my God, there's light. And the whole time the baby was developing things and it didn't even know it needed them. But what's interesting about it, and what I love about this idea, is that when you think about the end of our lives, and you think about when we die of this world, which we know we're going to, and where we go, we know that we will not need any of the things we were developing in the womb in this life. Like, we won't need our arms and our legs for where we're going next. That's what I meant. Sorry. We won't need our arms and our legs and our eyes for where we're going next, because we leave our bodies here. Our bodies stay. But that means if energy can't be created or destroyed, and we are essentially energy, where do we go? And what do we need for that world? What do we need for where we're going next? Baha'u'llah says that in this life, this period of time that we're given, for some it's short, for others long, we are here to develop all of the spiritual attributes, the spiritual versions of our eyes and our ears and our arms and our legs, all of the things we can't see. We are here to develop all of those things, because those will become our eyes and our ears and our noses and our arms and legs where we're going next. What he also says is that where we're going next is coexisting with where we are now. Just like when we were in the womb, we were still here living in this life on earth. He says that the next life after we die is here. We just don't have the eyes to see it. And what separates us from this life to the next is as thin as the human eyelid. It's a thin veil. And just like when we were able to influence a baby in the womb, just like we know the baby was coming, all of the souls that we love that have passed on to the next world, that are no longer physically here, are here waiting for us, praying for us, helping us every single day, assisting us when we get those feelings, those premonitions, that intuition, that feeling of like, oh, maybe I should do that, or that these ideas. These are our family members, our friends, our angels who are coexisting with us, just like I was with my daughter while she was in the womb, praying for her, talking to her, playing her classical music. They are here with us the whole time. And we're told that where we're going next is as different as this world was to the womb. And so when you think about all of those things, when you put that into perspective, you go, oh, when I'm tested, when somebody pisses me off, when I'm struggling with something, when somebody hurts me, all of these are opportunities for me to develop those spiritual muscles, the spiritual arms and legs. What do they look like? Honesty, kindness, service, steadfastness, love, compassion, empathy. All of these things are the things we're going to need in the next world, whatever that looks like. And I want to end with one more thought, although I just lost it. Oh wait, no, I lost it. I'll come back to it. It's going to hit me. It's going to hit me really, really hard in a second.
That's
and so
okay.
all that being said, I just want to make sure that it's a hard thing to summarize in just a few minutes because I'm passionate about it. Oh, this is what I want to say. And for anybody that has a hard time understanding, and I have a hard time understanding how we could ever have a life outside of this one that is exalted beyond time and space. Abdu'l-Baha, who is the son of Baha'u'llah in the Baha'i faith, tells us that to understand how we can have a physical life without our physical bodies, God gave us the dream state, where we spend 1/3 of our life in a dream state, where physically our bodies get closest to what it looks like when we die, right? Our body temperature cools when we fall asleep and we start to dream. Our heart rate slows. Our breathing slows. All of these things happen, and then suddenly we're catapulted off somewhere into our deep sleep, and we're having a physical experience, yet our bodies are paralyzed. And how interesting that is, that you can measure in a dream, if something crazy happens, your heart rate changes, or you start to move. We've all seen ourselves having these dreams where we're moving, but we're not moving. So God gave us the gift of saying, for 1/3 of your life, when you fall asleep at night, I'm going to show you that you have the ability to have a physical experience without having a physical body. And I think that's so comforting if we can think about that, because we don't have control when we're dreaming. We don't have control right before we fall asleep. It's an unknown. We don't know if we're going to wake up the next morning. It's just like death. And yet we go somewhere, we have an experience, and that experience can give us an insight into what can happen when we pass away.
Yeah.
That's what I got. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer for everybody.
No, I think it's very interesting to think about, trying to ground these things that are really intangible and really mysterious, because the reality is, we are taught all these things about what life after death might be, but none of us have ever felt it. We've never been there,
Nobody knows.
I've never been. People ask me, oh, what do Baha'is believe about the afterlife? And I'll try to explain something, but I always will kind of at the end, kind of give this disclaimer of, but I've never been. But I know that in this world, in this life, I can develop these qualities. I can try to be a better person, more kind person, a more truthful person. And you see the sort of positive impacts in this life of developing these qualities and displaying them. I want to ask you also, in this, where you have found value in your life in confronting this inevitability of death. Because I think people often, when thinking about, death and loss, it's really scary. And
super scary.
Also, it's like, well, it's like, as we were saying, it's like this inconceivable idea. So what value have you drawn out from confronting this reality?
Well, the thing is, even though I just told everybody what I believe and what the Baha'i belief is, it doesn't mean that it's not still scary for me. It doesn't also mean that I have evolved or I'm woke in any way. Like, I still struggle with the same exact things. And I think that's part of the human experience and the journey, right? We're told that we should die to the world, meaning we should die to the physical world, that we should find a way over the course of our lives to detach ourselves from the lower nature, from the animal instincts, from being obsessed with the material, and die to the world so that we can live in the spirit. And that's, I mean, I'm not there. I guess when I'm there, I won't need to be here anymore. But I'm obsessed with my family and my children. I don't want to leave them. Like, I love life. I love people. I love this world. I love learning about new things. This is all I know. This is all we know as people. So I don't want to die. However, I want to make sure that if I do and when I do, I'm prepared as much as I possibly can be. It's like, if you're going to go run a marathon and you have a month, you could either say, yeah, I'm not going to train. I'm just going to show up and run 26.2 miles. Or you're like, I got a month. I should train every day so that I'm a little more prepared so that it doesn't like suck as much. That's kind of the way I view like death. Mm-hmm. And what's the worst that can happen? If we spend our lives trying to be good people and trying to be of service and learning about God, and let's just say, forget about the Baha'i faith. If you're Christian, learning about Jesus and spending your life like following his teachings and trying to walk and be like Jesus. Or if you're Muslim and you're fasting right now, first of all, happy Ramadan, and you're practicing your faith and you're trying to be like the prophet, like, what's the worst that can happen? You make people's lives better. You live a life of peace, of kindness. You're in touch with your feelings and your emotions. You're constantly thinking about what God would like you to do versus what you want to do. You're trying to live in your higher nature. What is the worst that can happen? You make an imprint on the world. You make people smile. You make this world a little bit of a better place. You bring light to it. Mm-hmm. Let's just say we're all wrong. Let's just say Baha'is wrong, Christians are wrong, Muslims are wrong. Let's just say that when we die, poof, lights out. What's the worst that can happen? Yeah. We are remembered for making a positive impact in the lives of the people that we know. Mm-hmm. We're remembered for being of service. Doesn't matter. We're not going to be here anymore and we're going to be gone. It's like, the TV turned off. Yeah. But what's the best that can happen? Well, the best that can happen, the best possible scenario is that where I go next, I've spent my life preparing for that marathon. I've spent my life preparing and developing all those spiritual qualities that are going to be my arms and legs where I'm going next. And let me tell you, I would much rather be prepared for a marathon than try to run it on the day with no training or preparation.
Yeah.
So the pros outweigh the cons. Whenever I have a conversation with an atheist, I love atheists, by the way. And I actually don't believe that atheists are that far away from the beliefs of the Baha'i faith, because one of the core tenets of our faith is the intersection, the unity of science and religion. But like, I always say, well, what's the worst that can happen? You have a belief in an unbelief of God. I have a belief in God. Let's just all become great people. Mm-hmm. And in the event that one of us is right, then everybody wins. Mm-hmm. Because we just spent our lives being of service.
Yeah.
And developing these attributes. But I would much rather be prepared for that race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also this sort of this importance of service, and even going back to the very first point you made about the coupling of belief and action, and how that is really what creates faith. When thinking about death and our relationship with it in a moment of crisis, I think this crisis has really shown us the necessity of action, where, we need to be better neighbors, better community members, better advocates, and how it's
better friends.
Yeah. It's this time limit that we have that really reinforces the urgency of this, where as individuals, we don't have, forever to think about,
No.
the need to care for those who are most vulnerable. But we have this life we have now, and incrementally as a collective, we can work towards a better reality. And so I think it's powerful to sort of to muse on this time limit, even as a motivating, factor.
Yeah. Well, we have finite time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real. And I think there's so many people that I know. I mean, just look at social media, the way that it's built. Look at the way that our world is currently built.
Mm-hmm.
We spend our lives running from the idea that we're not going to be here anymore,
Mm-hmm.
instead of embracing it, right? So we spend our whole lives trying to forget that one day we're going to die. What happened if we lived like we were dying, right? That's why I make my last days. What would happen? Would we make different choices? Would we stop an argument, mid-argument, when we realized we're being idiots, right? Would we forgive somebody that offended us? Would we like dare to love more? Would we try to heal the relationships with our parents or with people that have wronged us in unimaginable ways? How would we act if we just for a second were like, oh man, if I had a month to live, what would I do? And that's why Baha'u'llah asks us to meditate on our mortality.
Mm.
That's why these teachings exist. We don't have unlimited time here. So to a certain extent, we have to make our time here well spent. Now, it doesn't mean that we should have that anxiety and pressure that every moment of the day I have to be doing something that's positive. No, we're also human, right? We're not expected to be perfect. In fact, God made us imperfect in that way for a reason, right? If we were perfect, we'd be prophets. And nobody wants to be a prophet because their lives are filled with suffering and pain and nobody's listening to them, and they all eventually end up like, being martyred or,
Yeah.
hung on a cross for our sins.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want that burden.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just fine being a person, but I don't have an unlimited amount of time. It's okay to be perfect. And as Abdul Baha says, little by little, day by day,
Mm-hmm.
we should work to better ourselves, to develop those qualities, those spiritual arms and legs, little by little, day by day. And at the end of each night, we should take account of our actions. We should look at the way that we handled ourselves during the day. And if we find that we were maybe a little bit of a hot mess, maybe we were more irritable, maybe we were more angry, then we should just pray for the strength to improve for the next day.
Yeah.
And if we find that we did pretty good that day, we handled that well, like, wow, I forgave that person when they cut me off on the freeway or, whatever, then we should also pray and ask God for the strength to do that again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's it. That's all we're asked to do, really.
Effort. Yeah. Put some effort in. So I think in our conversation, we've answered kind of a lot of the questions that we've had coming in. We've been monitoring them. And I think one sort of stream that keeps coming up in our questions is about this concept of independent investigation of truth. Where do you find truth? Where do you search for what is right? And how do you understand that for yourself? Yeah.
That's one of the things I love about being a Baha'i is like, I don't care if anybody else is a Baha'i. I don't care if you're Christian or if you're Jew. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. I love you. If I meet you, I love you. And that's all that I'm told as a Baha'i that I'm supposed to do. I love you. That's it. Independent investigation of truth for me is just the coolest thing because we're told we're not supposed to ever do something just because someone else does it.
Mm-hmm.
Baha'u'llah says, don't be sheep. Don't just follow blindly the traditions of your parents. A good friend of mine told me a story once about traditions. And he was telling me that that every year he grew up as a kid, and he's like in his 50s now. Every year he grew up as a kid, and on Thanksgiving, his mom and his grandma, they would have ham. They would cut the ham in half, and then they'd put it in the oven, and they'd do all their stuff, and they'd basically take the ham out of the oven, and they would eat the ham that's been cut in half. They never put the whole ham in the oven. And every year they did it. Every single year, year after year. And then, of course, he grew up, and he had kids, and he started doing it. And nobody ever asked why. Why do we cut the ham in half? And 2 generations later, somebody asked that question. And they asked the grandma. And the grandma said, oh, sweetie, it was because our oven was too small. And you think back to like, oh, wow. So she cut the ham in half 70 years ago because the oven was too small. And here we are 60 years later doing it, even though the ham fits in the oven just fine. And we have to look at traditions and take them apart and dissect them and say, well, why are we doing those things in the first place? And that's what the independent investigation of truth is all about,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have to look and we have to educate ourselves and say, does this resonate with me? We should read the Bible. We should read the Quran. We should study what Jesus said and more importantly did. We should learn about all the major world religions. We should never just take what somebody says and apply that to our lives without learning about it for ourselves. And if you think about our world right now, especially the way that news spreads and especially the way that fear and anxiety spread, we're not doing that research.
Mm-hmm.
We're hearing one thing and then we're acting, right? We hear that somebody said this or this person said that, or this virus could do this. And then without really doing the research, we're reacting emotionally and we're then passing that on. And that spreads faster than any virus.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That anxiety and that fear, that misinformation, those things that are not rooted in reality spread so fast because it's rooted in something that isn't real. So all we're asked to do as Baha'is is to pause and to be like, okay, well, let me see how I feel about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me read about that. What does that mean to me? And then reflect. And then it's all between you and God.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this search for truth, it's like, you can have these kind of, like signpost kind of markers that ground you. So things like justice or might or tact or humility or whatever that is, and see, in my search for truth, whether you're reading up on current events or you're trying to ground or deepen your spiritual life, how through these tools you can really, glean so much. And I think some of it also is just learning to trust our own intuition and developing that as a muscle, because that can be really challenging when there are all these different like influences and opinions and things coming your way, like to just, how do you filter out what is right? And I think it's a lot of it comes down to kind of being able to trust your intuition based on these kind of capital T truths that exist in our world.
Well, I think that's a hard thing, because a lot of people there's a line between intuition and fear, and you don't know which voice is which, right? So for a lot of people, and myself and my wife, like we have these conversations, it's very hard to distinguish what's intuition and what is your ego.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Both can be very loud. And I believe that you can hear your intuition when you purify yourself. You can hear your intuition when you ask it a question, right? And we have to just be mindful of the voices in our heads, because we all have these voices. We all have these loud, egos. Baha'u'llah calls it the evil whispering one, the thing that's whispering in your heart and in your ears. And you have to separate that from what the pure intuition is. It's like that old idea of the angel and the devil, but that can happen. There's a prayer in the Baha'i faith. We talk about purifying ourselves so that we can become hollow reeds, right? So that we can be open. That's, I think, the other thing is, like, I don't think we can figure out what our intuition is unless we open ourselves up and we're pure. And we do our best. Now, of course, people can hear their intuitions all day long. There's amazing people, and also I believe women are better at this than men. But for a lot of people like me, you have to practice and learn, and over time discover what your intuition is saying, and make sure that it's not your ego. Because then you can be acting on your lower nature a lot and do a lot of bad stuff, thinking that it's your intuition, and you don't want to do that. Can we, by the way, so I promised my kids that Daddy would be available to them. Do we want to maybe ask another question, and then we can hop off?
Yeah, well, let's do one more, and then we're wrapping up. We're coming up on an hour. So
I'm trying to find the balance. Between
it's always
service and also being of service to my family. And I decided this last week that it was more important for me to show up for my family than it was for me to show up for the world. And that is, speaking of the faith, that is something that I love and I appreciate so much about the Baha'i writings, is that we are not supposed to go teach the whole world and spread the faith and convert everybody. We're supposed to live the teachings in our own households, because unity can never spread. If the purpose of the Baha'i faith, if the purpose of religion, of all religions, is the unification of humankind, that can never happen if we're not doing it in our own houses. Because the second we walk out there and we start to try to live by example, we're hypocrites. And people can pick up on that, right? And that's one of the reasons why I think people are frustrated by religion, right? You see all these, all these people that are these priests and these cardinals and these people that go to church every Sunday, or the mosque and the synagogue. And then there's a lot of people you see in the Baha'i faith too. Nobody is exempt from it, living differently.
Mm-hmm.
All that matters is that it starts in our houses.
Yeah.
We spent our whole lives perfecting our actions in our households. Then that, in the eyes of God, I think, is as important or more important than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just only say that.
Yeah.
I only say that because I've been thinking about it a lot.
You kind of answered the question that I was going to ask you, which was about, somebody had wondered, about how we take action, thinking a lot about, this person was wondering about sort of racial violence and injustice that we see in our country, and how do we have an impact? And I think what you said is really the key, is it starts with you. It starts with our own ability to, kind of humble ourselves, take time to learn, and work first on our family, our friends, and our individual communities, as opposed to seeing this huge issue that's, hundreds of years in the making, but to start that with our own hearts.
But specifically to, we can end on this question, but specifically to the idea of injustices and racism as an example. I mean, of course, everybody is well aware of the young man who was murdered running the other day. And I think it's really important to note that in the Baha'i faith, we're asked, specifically people who are not white, to be the voices, because those who have been the victims of oppression throughout history should not be the ones that have to stand up and yell through the noise. It should be those of us who have the privilege of not being oppressed. Those of us who have over time been the oppressors, that must stand up and use our voices to empower theirs. It is my obligation as a person who is white to make sure that I am using my voice to stand up for my friends who are Black, who have not had their voices heard historically. There's a big difference between that and being a white savior. If anybody is interested, Ruha Benjamin is an incredible Baha'i. Please follow her.
And she did a talk with us a few weeks ago.
She did, and she wrote this. She has this amazing talk that she just released called "Black Skin, White Mask," I think. And again, the thing I love about a Baha'i is that to a certain extent, we're asked to be advocates. We're asked to be on the front lines and talking about these issues. And specifically, I mean, even in the Baha'i faith, we're told that Baha'u'llah looked at a Black person as the pupil of the eye, right? Endowed with all the spiritual capacities, the center of the eye, the center of humankind. And that racism is our most pressing issue, the very thing that will be the roadblock to unity. So therefore, as Baha'is, right, we're told that justice is the most beloved thing that's in the eyes of God, and that the pillars of justice are reward and punishment. We must be mindful of what is just, and therefore we must use our voices to advocate when we see a wrong, because no matter what it is, no matter whoever is being oppressed, whether it is through racism or sexism or LGBTQ rights, whatever it is, we cannot stand by and sit idly while people are hurt and oppressed. And that is our obligation as Baha'is. And that's one thing I love about being Baha'i. We get to stand up for things that are wrong, right? We stay out of politics, but we stand up for injustices. So
that was just amazing. Thank you so much for being here. You need to book him again, because we've got quite a following and quite a bit that's happening. Just wonderful. Thanks so much, Justin.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to leave you guys. I'm going to go see my kids. Can you tell everybody where this is going to be playing on Facebook?
Yes. So we've been streaming on our Facebook page, which is just Baha'i.chat. And we're also going to be uploading the full video to YouTube and sharing some segments onto our YouTube channel and Instagram page. So you can follow us. It's all Baha'i.chat. And you can also email us at info@baha'i.chat if you have questions, if you want to get in touch with a Baha'i, if you have ideas for future presentations, and we want to just stay connected in every way we can.
I so appreciate you guys doing this. Bye, everybody. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all.